As horror fans, we're all acquainted with Clive Barker, the horror genius who created the most sinister torture movies through his Hellraiser series. Clive Barker's creation of Cenobites has profoundly impacted the horror genre, paving the way for the creation of subsequent generations of torturers. But there are certain other creations by Clive Barker that aren't well recognized or appreciated as the Hellraiser. Today, we're going to talk about 13 such film adaptations of Clive Barker's work that were either a hit or a miss for the horror fans. So let's dig in. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Your pathetic little shepherd has no hold on him.
Rawhead Rex, 1986. The film showcases the rise of a pagan deity, infamously known in folklore as Rawhead, and its gory rampage throughout the town. As an American professor, Howard Hallenbeck goes on a vacation with his family to rural Ireland, where he's researching some religious themes for his upcoming book. Unfortunately for them, a farmer accidentally unleashes an ancient monster named Rawhead Rex in the same town they're visiting. Their fun trip of the scenic town turns into a horrific tale, as the monster begins killing animals and humans for food, while preying on women and even kills Howard's son. This creature predates Christianity, and the power of the church has no effect on him. Frustrated by the authorities' inability to catch the monster, Howard takes it upon himself to hunt him down. Eventually, with the help of his wife and a Neolithic feminist weapon, he's able to subdue and trap the monster under the ancient giant stone. But this stubborn monster rises again from the ground as the film ends. Directed by George Pavlou, this film is a 1986 Irish adaptation of Clive Barker's short story of the same name. This particular story appeared in Volume 3 of Barker's Books of Blood series. Although the screenplay was by Clive Barker himself, he didn't like the film at all. According to him, the film diverted from the path he'd chosen in his book. While Barker describes the monster as a phallic-looking creature that unleashes the Old Testament-related violence in the town, Pavlou's adaptation made the monster gorier and hungrier in a motiveless sense.
You have destroyed our refuge.
Nightbreed, 1990. Aaron Boone is haunted by the recurring nightmares of some place known as Midian, which doesn't exist on human maps. He meets with a psychotherapist, Dr. Philip Decker. Unbeknownst to Aaron, Philip is a serial killer who's going around brutally slaughtering families in the town. Philip leads Aaron into believing that he's the killer of all those heinous murders in the town. Philip tricks Aaron into taking LSD, and he is later hospitalized. Then he learns from a fellow patient that Midian is an abandoned graveyard, where the monsters like Aaron are accepted with open arms by a monstrous tribe called Nightbreed. Believing himself to be a monster, Aaron goes to join Midian, but he gets bitten by one of the Nightbreeds and runs away. Philip leads the police to get Aaron arrested, but Aaron is shot and killed by the police. He soon wakes up as a monster because of the bite he received, and now joins the Nightbreed. Philip finds out about this and manipulates the authorities into attacking the heinous monsters. The Nightbreed are actually just some unusual-looking folklore creatures who were living in peace until the prejudiced humans tried to kill them. They started living in the shadows, away from humanity. A fight ensues between the Nightbreed and the police. Although Nightbreed overpower them, Midian is left in ruins and exposed to the world. Aaron is now renamed Cabal and the savior of the Nightbreed, and given the responsibility to find a new place for them. Philip also gets killed and rises again as a Nightbreed with hatred towards his own kind, like it was any different when he was a human. This film is the adaptation of Clive Barker's 1988 novella Cabal, which is written and directed by Barker himself in 1990. Barker was disappointed with the final cut that the studio approved. In 2014, the original film reels were reobtained and released in a director's cut through Scream Factory.
You're mine now.
Candyman, 1992. A graduate student named Helen finds out about the Candyman during her research on urban legends. Drawn by this topic, she learns that he's a spirit that visits those who speak his name 5 times in front of a mirror. In addition, she finds out about the recent murders at Cabrini Green public homes, where dozens of people have died, and the locals call it the doing of the Candyman. With her friend Bernadette, she works on a thesis of how Cabrini Green residents use the Candyman legend to deal with the loss they suffered. They even try summoning him in front of the mirror, but to no avail. Upon visiting the location, she meets Anne Marie, a single mom to an infant named Anthony. Anne is scared that the Candyman will take away her son, and we all know that the child is going to make things more intense. Helen and her husband Trevor have a dinner with a legend expert, Professor Philip Purcell, who tells them where the legend comes from. Candyman was an African-American man named Daniel, born in the 1800s to a slave. He became a famous painter and fell in love with a white woman who got pregnant with his child. Her racist father sent a mob to kill him. These psychos severed severed Daniel's right hand and then smeared honeycomb all over him. This attracted a swarm of bees to sting the poor man to death. His body was burned in a pyre where the current Cabrini Green home is built. Helen is eventually attacked by a gang leader who turns out to be the one posing as Candyman and killing people to instill fear. He's in prison for the murders, but then the real Candyman shows up, bothered that Helen doesn't believe in his existence. He keeps pestering her to voluntarily become his victim, and then frames her as a murderer of Bernadette and kidnapper of Anthony. She's put into a psych hospital. She summons him to prove his existence, so he kills the psychiatrist and frees her. After escaping, she returns to her apartment and finds that Trevor has moved on with his student, whom she always doubted. Now isolated thanks to Candyman, she goes to his lair to rescue Anthony, but Candyman offers her immortality and kisses her with a mouthful of bees. She passes out and wakes up to find a painting that reveals Helen resembles Caroline, aka the Candyman's white lover. She later finds that Candyman has trapped Anthony in a pyre, and he also wants her to burn to death with him. She stabs him with a burning wood and saves Anthony before dying. In the end, Trevor is seen regretful of his actions as he calls her name 5 times in front of a mirror. Helen pays a visit and brutally mutilates him to death as she becomes one of the legends she was researching about. Well, that was an immersive thesis. This film is an adaptation of the short story named The Forbidden from Clive Barker's Books of Blood Volume 5. It was written and directed by Bernard Rose in 1992. It did pretty well in the box office and was followed up by 3 sequels. While Barker's story had the theme of class issues, Rose's adaptation was themed around race issues.
Candyman. Candyman.
Candyman, Farewell to the Flesh, 1995. 3 years after the events of the first film, Professor Phillip writes his famous book about Candyman and reveals the real story of Daniel. He concludes Helen to be the murderer of the past events and remarks that Candyman is nothing but a fictional threat. Dude even calls Candyman 5 times looking at his book's reflective cover. Later, he meets Ethan Tarrant, who blames him for his father's murder, as he told everyone that Candyman wasn't real. But his father summoned the legend and got killed. Phillip dismisses Ethan and goes to the bathroom, only to get killed by the Candyman. He is back. Ethan is arrested for the murder as he was seen in a brawl with Phillip and gets investigated by Detective Ray. Ethan's sister Annie, who looks a lot like Helen, and mother Octavia come to defend him, but to no avail, as Ethan has already confessed to killing Phillip. Annie works as a teacher, and one day she hears her students arguing about the existence of Candyman. She assures them that he's not real and even blurts out his name 5 times. Lo and behold, the same night, Candyman arrives at her house and kills her husband. She later finds out that she's Candyman's great-great-granddaughter and belongs to the family responsible for killing him. When he was killed, his girlfriend Caroline was pregnant with their daughter. Her father had mocked Daniel with Caroline's mirror as he lay dying. Since then, a part of his soul was trapped in that mirror. Annie's father had found out that he could kill Candyman by destroying the mirror, but got killed before he could do so. Annie confronts her mother, who's in denial of Candyman's existence, and gets killed by him. Her brother Ethan, on the other hand, gets mocked by Detective Ray, who calls out for Candyman and also gets killed. Ethan then runs out of the crime scene, suspected of the murder. He is, well, also killed by a policeman. Caroline had hidden the mirror in Daniel's birthplace. That was the slaves' quarters in Annie's rundown family home. She goes to retrieve the mirror, and after a brief struggle between her and Candyman, where he tries to show her the brutality of her family, she smashes the mirror, and Candyman shatters along with it. Directed by Bill Condon, this film is a direct sequel to the first film that was based on Clive Barker's The Forbidden, and was not well received by the audience due to its repetitive nature and forgettable characters. The only worthy scene of this film is the flashback of Daniel being tortured to death by the racist bunch of lowlives.
I was born to murder the world.
Lord of Illusions, 1995. In 1982, in the Mojave Desert, a sorcerer and cult leader named Nyx the Puritan is having a ritual to sacrifice a young girl named Dorothea. He promises his followers that this ritual will help him share his knowledge with them. Some of his cult members have become a rebellious group, one of whom is Philip Swan. They all come to rescue Dorothea, and during the struggle, Dorothea ends up shooting Nyx down while his assistant Butterfield runs away. They put an ironwork mask over his head to bind his powers before burying him. 13 years later, Dorothea is married to Philip Swan, who has become a famous illusionist. She hires private investigator Harry Dahmer to protect Philip as the rebellious members keep getting killed. They believe it's Butterfield's doing, and assume he's trying to resurrect Nyx with the other cult members. During one of his performances, Philip gets stabbed to death as an error in his illusion, but it's later revealed that he faked his death to avoid Nyx's minions. Nyx eventually gets resurrected and seeks revenge. Meanwhile, Dorothea and Harry become close before she gets abducted by Butterfield. Nyx, who now looks monstrous mistress, makes the earth swallow his loyal followers, deeming them unworthy. He exclaims that only Philip is worthy of his knowledge. He again tries sacrificing Dorothea, but Harry saves her. Nix then asks Philip to join his cult again, while Philip kills Butterfield. Philip sacrifices himself to save Dorothea, allowing Harry to kill Nix. Written and directed by Clive Barker, this film is a neo-noir supernatural horror story based on Barker's short story, The Last Illusion, from his Books of Blood Volume 6. This film was the big screen debut of Barker's famous occult detective, Harry Dahmer. Despite taking elements from his own short story, Barker surprised his book fans by creating a new villain and morphing a different story for the film. This movie stands as the last film Clive Barker has directed after Hellraiser and Nightbreed, and received mixed reviews from the viewers.
You lucky me, a customer.
Quicksilver Highway, 1997. Directed by Mick Garris, this comedy horror film features the works of both the horror geniuses Clive Barker's The Body Politic and Stephen King's Chattery Teeth. It follows a man named Aaron Quicksilver, who's a traveling showman. He tells the above two stories to the people he meets. First, he meets a married couple and tells them the story of Chattery Teeth, how a set of toy teeth come to life and save a traveling salesman named Bill Hogan when a psychopath hitchhiker attacks him. Later, he meets a pickpocket and recites the story of The Body Politic. Dr. Charles George is a plastic surgeon who one day finds out that his hands have developed a mind of their own. His hands rebel against him and eventually lead a revolt of severed hands that try to overthrow their human hosts.
Come to me.
Candyman 3, Day of the Dead, 1999. 25 years after the second Candyman movie, this film focuses on Caroline, now the grown-up daughter of Annie. Remember her? Annie was killed by Candyman, and her death was ruled a suicide. Before dying, Annie asked her daughter to destroy the Candyman myth. So Candyman isn't dead, obviously. Caroline works at an art gallery that's working on a Candyman-themed gallery to profit off the famous legend. She remarks that Daniel from the painting was a kind man, and Candyman doesn't really exist. She even calls his name 5 times to prove her point, and we all know where this is going by now. She's greeted by her great-great-great-grandfather, who pesters her to be his victim throughout the movie, repeating the same technique, framing her for murders and isolating her from everyone around her, until in the end she kills him by destroying his painting and puts the blame of all his murders on a cruel racist man who is now dead. This finally ends the myth, along with Candyman. But does it really? As we've already seen him die in every single film ever made, and he just comes back with a bad sequel. This film was directed by Turi Meyer in 1999 as a direct sequel to the 1995 sequel, and it succeeds in ruining the franchise even further. Saint Sinner, 2002. A rookie monk named Thomas releases 2 succubi in a stupid accident while playing with serious supernatural objects. The succubi sisters Munkar and Nakir use the Wheel of Time to jump from the 19th century to the 21st century to escape the monks. Thomas is given the opportunity to redeem himself by traveling to the 21st century and capturing the demon sisters again. Taking Saint Nicodemus' sacred dagger that originally trapped the sisters, he goes to the modern world of Seattle. The sisters have already begun the chaos by slaughtering and feeding on men. While hunting them, he arrives at one of their murder scenes, where he gets arrested as a suspect in the murder. Detective Rachel, who's investigating him, doesn't believe in his nonsense about demons, but when more bodies pile up, she joins him on his hunt. They eventually capture the sisters using the Holy Dagger. The film is written by Doris Egan and Hans Rodionoff, and produced by Clive Barker. The full title of the film reads Clive Barker Presents Saint Sinner. It's a readaptation of one of Clive Barker's Marvel comics. Yes, Barker had worked with Marvel to publish Razorline comic stories, but he wasn't happy with the way Marvel handled his creation, especially the Saint Sinner. So with the help of worthy creators, he showcased his vision through this film. The Midnight Meat Train, 2008. A struggling photographer named Leon Kaufman arrives with his girlfriend Maya, who supports him as he follows his passion. Rejected by a reputed gallery owner who asked him to get out of his comfort zone, Leon decides to shift to night photography. He starts venturing into the New York City nightlife, capturing the rough realities of the darkest corners of the city. Eventually, a man named Mahogany captures his attention, and through investigation, he links Mahogany with various instances of missing people from the train. It turns out that Mahogany slaughters the last passengers on the train and treats their bodies as meat on a farm. Even the train driver helps him do this. Leon eventually grows obsessed with revealing this case and gets too close to the secrets. Meanwhile, his girlfriend and friend also fear for his well-being and break into Mahogany's apartment. They learn that the dude is suspicious and the police don't show any interest in their claims. So Maya gets the bright idea to board the same train where people go missing. Leon fights with Mahogany and manages to kill him, but the train driver reveals a shocking truth. It turns out that he works for a secret society that recruits a butcher to kill kill people so that they can feed the ancient monstrous beings living beneath the city. This helps the monsters stay away from the human world and prevents them from causing violence on a large scale. Even the authorities are aware of this arrangement. He then kills Maya and cuts off Leon's tongue, forcing him to work as a butcher in Mahogany's place. So they continue the cycle of preventing large violence with a small one. Directed by Ryuhei Kitamura, this film is considered one of the best adaptations of Clive Barker's work. It keeps most of the elements from his short story of the same name intact, while changing a few things that only make the film more intense. Dread 2009. The film follows a college kid named Quaid who had a traumatic childhood, where his parents were murdered by an axe killer right in front of his eyes. He befriends a film major kid named Steven, and together they set out to conduct a fear study project where they will interview different people about their fears. Although Steven views it as a school project, Quaid grows obsessive over people's fears, and gets frustrated when most of them tell not-so-traumatic fears. Their friend and project partner Cheryl reveals her fear and disgust towards meat and its smell. When she was a kid, her father worked at a butcher shop and one day came back smelling of meat before he molested her. Since then, she's repelled even by the thought of it. Steven reveals that his brother had died while drunk driving, and he feels so guilty for letting his brother drive and that he fears going behind the wheel again. Another kid named Joshua reveals that he has a fear of going deaf, as he once went temporarily deaf as a kid. Using all these fears, the unhinged Quaid first forces Steven to get in the exact copy of the car his brother died in, and then proceeds to drink while driving. He then locks Cheryl in her room for weeks with a plate of cooked meat. She grows physically and mentally drained, and she is eventually forced to eat the now rotten meat. While this torture is going on, Quaid lured Joshua into his house and shot a gun so close to his ear that the poor guy went deaf. Even at the end, Quaid wins, as Steven is killed by Joshua, who is then killed by Quaid. He then throws Steven's dead body to the still trapped Cheryl so that she could feast on him. The Twisted Tale is an adaptation of Clive Barker's short story of the same name, from Book of Blood Volume 2, directed and written by Anthony de Blasi. It's one of the most underrated of Barker's adaptations that features a human monster instead of a supernatural one, which to be honest seems more realistic than the existence of an army of Cenobites. Book of Blood 2009. Mary, a paranormal professor, partners up with Reg to investigate a haunted house with a past of brutal and mysterious killings. They recruit a boy named Simon, who's Mary's student and seems to have psychic ability. While they set up their devices in the house and begin spending time there, Mary and Simon get forbiddingly close to each other. They soon learn that the haunted house is an intersection between the human and ghost world, kind of a ghost highway filled with hundreds of ghosts desperate to tell their story. The ghosts choose Simon to be their living diary, as they engrave their stories on his skin, cursing him with eternal torture. Mary promises to share their story with the world, and over the years becomes a famous author, with her source material tied in the basement. Simon finds a way to escape her, but Mary hires a hitman to bring her the inscriptions. After kidnapping Simon and separating his skin from his body, the hitman gets drowned in a supernatural flood of blood. Mary arrives the next day to see Simon's skin with all the inscriptions, and much to her delight, the stories are still being scribbled on it. This story, Book of Blood, is the first entry in Clive Barker's Book of Blood series, and all the stories that follow afterwards are the tales written on Simon's body by the ghosts that haunt him. This film is directed by John Harrison and only slightly brushes into the darkness that Barker has created. Books of Blood 2020. The film ties 3 different stories together in a haphazard manner. The story of Mary involves her losing her child, and while she is still dealing with the loss, she's approached by Simon, who claims that he can speak with the dead. Skeptical, Mary uses Simon for her experiment, and when he reveals the last conversation she had with her son, she believes him. The two eventually become a couple, but Mary finds out that Simon lied about everything and was sent by her ex-husband to help her cope. To top it off, he's cheating on her. She goes to her child's room crying, but her kid's ghost asks her to bring Simon to them. She tricks Simon into thinking that they're having another experiment and asks him to fake his act as usual for the sake of the scholars. She sends him to a room full of ghosts to write their stories on Simon's body, making him the Book of Blood. Mary reads the tragic stories of selfish Jenna and greedy Bennett written on Simon's body as the film creators attempt to connect them. The 2 stories of Mary and Bennett are adapted from Barker's The Book of Blood and On Jerusalem Street from Books of Blood Volumes 1 and 6 respectively. The selfish Jenna story is the one that the creators Brandon Braga and Adam Simon wrote and added to drag sense out of the film. Candyman 2021. Directed by Nia DaCosta, the film is a direct sequel to the original 1992 Candyman film. The little boy Anthony is all grown up and has no idea about the haunting past his mother experienced. Helen is remembered as a deranged woman in the story who killed several people. During his artistic search, Anthony finds out about the story of the first film and meets a man named William. As a kid, William witnessed a police officer beat a black man, Sherman Fields, to death, believing him to be the man who gave a white kid a razor blade and candy. But the crime kept going on even after his death. William later saw Sherman returning as another Candyman, which proves that there are multiple Candymen who result from racist violence. Inspired by the legend, Anthony creates his paintings and spreads his story, which makes people stupidly call out his name. Candyman is summoned and the slaughter begins again. Anthony learns about his past, and a single bee sting starts deteriorating his hand as he slowly turns into the new Candyman. The unhinged William helps hasten the process by forcefully severing Anthony's hand, replacing it with a hook, and telling him how racism has given birth to various Candymen in history, and he wants Anthony to be one of them. So he calls the police to do what they do best, and Anthony is also unjustly killed by the white police officers and comes back as another Candyman. Marvelous verdict. Despite publishing such remarkable horror classics with so many fascinating monsters, Clive Barker rarely got his fair share of adaptations. His genius remained limited to the studio compromises and molded world of commercialism. Directors were quick to use his plot, but often failed to capture the true essence of Barker's creations. Only Barker and a few others were able to bring justice to his books with their suitably eerie direction. Fans still await more worthy adaptations of Clive Barker's fantastically dark and twisted world. Which of his works would you like to see come to life on the big screen? Let us know in the comments. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone!